April 1944, the city of Heraklion, Crete. On the road to Arcanas, not far from the German headquarters, two British officers and a few Cretan partisans are hiding, waiting for General Heinrich Kreipe, German military commander of Crete. They plan to abduct him. When Kreipe's car appears around a curve, the British, in German uniforms, stop it.
Papiere bitte. Ich bin General Kreipe.
A second later, Kreipe is a prisoner of war, and the unique story of courage begins. Some partisans run off the vineyards. The others force the general into his car and pass a number of German controls before disappearing down the mountain road running to Heraklion. After an 18-day walk through snow and sleet along the dangerous paths that crisscross Mount Ida, the partisans reach the southern coast of Crete, where a boat is waiting to take them to Cairo. Operation Apagoi is completed. 28 years later, I organized this strange reunion in an Athens television studio. Good evening, sir. Good evening. And, of course, we know you speak Greek fluently, maybe better than us. Ex-British Major Patrick Leigh Fermor, now a well-known author, walks in to meet wartime friends. Friends he never forgot. They are still brothers, members of his party. He is still Philedem, their leader. He meets the two leading members of the Cretan partisans, Manoli Paterakis a simple, brave man from Kanya. After all he did for his country, only the Germans gave him a job. Recognizing the help he gave General Kreipe during the escape to Mount Ida, they appointed him guard of the German cemetery in Crete. George Tirakis was the second in command. We found him after extensive inquiries in Johannesburg, where he has lived for 15 years. Now a bar owner. He's well off, but not changed. The kiss has a long tradition among Cretans as a way of expressing close friendship. Patrick Fermor, codenamed Paddy, Tirakis and Paterakis, with Bill Stanley Moss, who died some years ago, were the first of the party that moved slowly through the garrison area to Heraklion, gathering other partisans like Grigori Chnarakis.
Ο Γρηγόρης είναι. Ο Γρηγόρης Ναράκης είναι. Λάθος. Γεια σου. Δεν μου λέει. Αλλά είναι άλλος συμπαίκτης.
And Andoni Papaleonides. Fermor needed a smart, quiet man to provide information. A man like Miki Akoumyanakis. He's a wealthy man now. He owns his house, his own land, and he has a family to take care of him. In the days of war, he lived next to Villa Ariadne, the general's house. His sister was working at the German headquarters. Thus, he had inside information about the general. As the day of the abduction drew closer, more reliable men had to be found. One such man was Dimitri Dzadzas, who joined the team as it made its way to Heraklion. Now retired, he recounts the adventure as he drinks coffee with his friends in the tiny village of Episkopi. It helps to pass the time. Elia Athanasakis, now an engineer, was very young then. Though 17 years old, he was one of the important members of the party, working silently to gather information concerning Kraipe. The final stage. Now Fermor needs a good driver, a man who knows every narrow path in the area. The escape man, Stratis Saviolis. He was a gendarme in a village near Heraklion. Finally, Manoli Vrelianakis, who joined the team later as a guide to the impassable Mount Ida and then to the south coast of Crete. Vrelianakis is a hard worker, and life in the harbor is still difficult under the burning sun all day long. The party complete, the detailed plans finalized, Operation Apagoi begins. An operation which proved to be one of the most daring of the war. Fermor remembers now.
What I heard about the general was, when I arrived there, was that he'd come from the Russian front. He'd had no experience of Cretan life at all, and by the time the abduction occurred, he hadn't done anything bad in Crete at all. On the contrary, the general impression was that he was a good man, unlike his predecessors, who were terrible, and who killed and burnt and slew all over Crete. So the general impression was really rather a favourable one. I saw him twice on the road when I was with Nikos Mastorakis, spying out the road, and I waved and he saluted back. This is about a week before we captured him.
After 28 years, the echoes of war are pushed aside. Enemies easily become friends. There are no victors, no defeated. No matter who wins, there is nothing but the defeated after war. This is why General Heinrich Kraipe, 77 years old, came all the way from Hanover to shake hands with the man who brought his military career to such a sudden end. He recognizes most of his abductors, especially Paterakis, the man who took care of him when he was wounded and starving. The once tough Cretan partisans are warriors no more. For them, Kraipe is still a general, and though their faces reflect deep respect for him, they feel no remorse for what they did.
Could you ask the general to sit down? Sit down.
Herr General, ich bin so zufrieden, Ihnen wiederzusehen, nach so vielen Jahren.
Sie haben sich auch nicht sehr verändert. Etwas älter sind Sie geworden.
Κύριε Φέρμο, θα μπορούσατε να μας μεταφράζετε, γιατί τα γερμανικά μας δεν είναι τόσο καλά όσο τα δικά σας.
Λοιπόν, ο κύριος στρατηγός, εγώ είπε, τι θαυμάσιο πρέπει να το ξανασμίξουμε μετά από τόσο πολλά χρόνια δηλαδή.
Θέλετε να το ρωτήσετε ορισμένα πράγματα τα οποία θα θέλαμε να αναφέρουμε.
No hard feelings, he says. If there were any, I wouldn't be here. Patrick Leigh struggles to express his thoughts in English, Greek and German, so all can understand. Lights, cameras, audience suddenly disappear. They all go back.
Ich war auf der Fahrt in mein Quartier und an einer Kurve stand plötzlich ein deutscher Posten, anhielt.
I was on the way to the headquarters when two men in German uniforms stopped us on a curve. Who are you? What do you want? I asked. It was very strange to stop us without any reason. Your papers, please, said Major Fermor or the other man. My mistake was to come out of the car. By the time I did it, some others, how they call them, partisans, came out of the bushes, threw me on the ground and tied me up. They forced me into the car and with a German gun pointing my head, we drove to Heraklion. Later on, we stopped, and they took me out of the car again. Fermor came out with me.
Well, the moment the car slowed down, we dressed up as German corporals. I went to the left-hand door, opened it, seized the general. No, I didn't seize the general at once. I saw who he was by his medals, and asked him for his papers. And he said, "I'm General Kreiper." And I caught hold of him, pulled him out, and the other boys immediately took care of him, tied him up, and put him in the back of the car. Meanwhile, my second in command, Captain Moss, had opened the other door, hit the driver on the head, taken him out, jumped to the driver's seat, and then I immediately jumped in beside him where the general had been sitting, wearing the general's hat, which had fallen off in the road. And all the other boys, Saviolakis, Patirakis, jumped in, and off we went. And we only did it just in the nick of time, because it took just about a minute, and the moment we moved off, a whole stream of German cars, German troop-carrying cars full of German soldiers passed by, so we did it just in the nick of time.
The men in the party were very nice. They treated me well. Of course, some bad things happened. I fell from the mule and hurt my shoulder. They took care of me. I couldn't walk easily. I didn't have rubber shoes for the slippery rocks like they had. I suffered a lot.
Gummisohlen hatte. Das war besser für das Gebirge. Ja, das ist für mich sehr beschwerlich.
The point of the operation was to inflict a tremendous insult against the German prestige in Crete. Because the Germans have been tormenting Crete for the last 2 years. They've been killing and burning villages, and the most appalling tyranny prevailed in Crete. And to destroy their morale, and to bolster our own, and show that at least we could do something in the resistance against the Germans. So we decided on capturing the command of the island. And that's how the whole thing started.
Nach 25 Jahren war in mir der Entschluss gereift, die alte
After
Städte
25 years,
Griechenland,
I
Athen
finally decided to visit Greece,
zu besuchen.
Athens, Crete. The
Zuletzt
latest
der
challenge for me
Anstoß war,
was a letter I got from Major Fermor, and then an invitation to come to Athens for this television program.
nachdem
So I am here.
ich vorher lange
Next
nichts
year,
gehört hatte.
I'll spend my holidays in Crete.
Ich kriegte ein Schreiben, dass
Greece
ich
is a lovely,
durch
friendly country.
zu einer Filmgesellschaft kommen sollte, zu einer Unterhaltung.
I think our results were obtained. And I think the German morale went down distinctly. Everywhere one heard disappointment, defeatism among the Germans, and of course among us, the Cretans, I mean, because I considered myself a Cretan by then. Our morale shot up about 1,000 miles in the air, and optimism reigned through the whole of Crete in spite of all the terrible things that happened afterwards. The morale was extremely high, and I think we can consider that the object of the operation was achieved.
Wenn ich danach gefragt werde, muss ich sagen, es war eine sehr
If you ask me,
mutige
I must
Tat,
admit that my abduction was a very daring operation,
Durchtrupp
a brave
ins
and
Nichts
risky
hinein
act.
getan
But I
wurde.
don't think that it was
Auswertung
practical.
in größerer Form
It didn't help the partisans
für
at
die
all.
Besatzung nicht.
When we set off with the general finally in the mountains after Noia, we went right up onto the top of Mount Ida, and we went through terrible hardships because the whole of the German garrison, of the whole of Crete, was out all round Mount Ida, all round Heraclion, everywhere, thousands of them. And so what we had to do was to hide in caves by day and move very, very carefully at night, and sending messages forward to find out whether it was free, the areas we planned to go through, and then moving on, sometimes with a mule for the general, sometimes on foot, with snow and rain and very, very steep mountains. And the general fell down occasionally. One time the saddle broke and he fell down again. We went from village to village, never into the villages, hiding outside the villages, and the villages all looked after us, fed us, sent guards forward, and by the time we reached the coast of Heraklion, Rodakino, hundreds of Cretans knew exactly where we were, but not one of them betrayed us.
Before he left, Chrype asked Mikia Koumyanakis, "When you return to Crete, I want you to plant a flower in the garden of Villa Ariadne, my house. I want to find it flowering when I come back next year. Do that for me." There were many flowers burned, many people killed, many houses destroyed during the war. But flowers grow again, people forget, houses are rebuilt. Only the dead don't come back. Instead, babies are born to live, grow up and die. Some of them will have to fight for what they believe, even their freedom. There are people like the Cretans that feel desperately the need for freedom. They find it everywhere, even in the isolation of death. As Nikos Kazantzakis' last words, written on the grey stone of his grave, say, "I fear nothing, I hope for nothing, I am free."